Hey, how are you?
Doing well.
So, how are you feeling before your test?
I mean, I just took a practice test. It was my worst score that I've had.
When did you take that?
Sunday.
Okay. What was your break? Which test was this?
This was AMC Full-Length 4.
And your breakdown?
Um, uh, I mean, off the top of my head, let me even think. Okay, let me not even guess. I just have this pulled up. Okay. 124 Chem Phys, which is my lowest, because that's usually my best. 122 cars, 122 bio, 124 psych such. So
Okay.
total.
What was that?
492 total, yeah.
And you usually get like closer to, oh, you got on the third one, 499.
Yeah.
Okay. So, were you
And
like, yeah?
I was gonna say, and like the 499, even then it's like,
Mhm.
even reviewing those, I can tell like where I'm making mistakes. So it's like, okay, 499, but like if I can just fix this. A lot of it was just like rushing, like misreading things. It
For
would have been
for the recent one?
no for the oh for both actually, but 499, like yeah, I remember explicitly that. Even I remember my Chem Phys could have been,
Hmm.
but regardless.
And how did you feel for this one? Was it like, did you feel like it was worse as you were doing it? Did you?
Yeah,
Okay.
100%. I remember even like after the first section, I was like, okay, I can't tell if I'm just like not if I'm just like not warmed up right now, or this is just the hardest one. But I definitely could feel that it was just not going as well as I wanted it to.
Yeah.
Cars, I felt like I was doing better in cars, but it just was not the case at all.
Okay. Did you like get enough sleep like the night before? Were you like, did you feel more tired? Anything like,
Mhm. Can't say. I'm not sure.
got it.
I mean, I think I had enough sleep, but
Mhm.
I remember if I was like feeling fatigued or something.
Got it.
But
Um,
I feel like it might be some element of like test anxiety, I think.
mhm.
It's like even when I was reviewing the questions, I'm just like, I don't know how I'm getting
Got it.
wrong. Because like I did the blinded like redoing of my answers, and I was finding that I was getting like a lot of them back.
Mhm. Like
Yeah,
getting more of them right when you did your blind review.
right. Yes.
Okay. So that's good.
But
Uh,
for cars, it was kind of like,
mhm.
like I don't know why. I just can't get that together. But for
Got it.
those passages, yeah.
Okay. Did you finish reviewing this test?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. Anything, um, that still doesn't make sense or still gives you a hard time, anything like that?
Not not like anything blatant, no, aside from I guess cars. But cars is kind of its own issue. I think like maybe Psych Soc. I think I think when I well I what I noticed in this AAMC Full-Length 4 was it had less like it was more kind of dissecting the passage and the like research stuff and whatnot, as opposed to like wasn't
Oh,
very
you were saying
definite.
like for the psych social section, there was more experimental design.
Yeah, questions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good to to familiarize yourself with, because they could ask you a lot of questions on that, like
Mhm.
mediating variable, moderating variable, that kind of thing. Um, but yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about this score just because I think it's like more of an exception because your other score, like I have down your one other score from you, but I think your other scores, other than that third full length, I probably wrote down in like a different notebook or something. But for
Yeah, I
me,
mean, it was definitely showing that I had an upward trajectory, and then that one was just complete tank, and I was like, what?
yeah, and it could be especially kind of annoying if that's the last test that you're taking. So I think if you just remember that every test like that you take, you do better on. It's just that the stuff that you learn for one test may not appear again for like a number of tests.
Right.
Then of course, like the test anxiety. Um, do you ever feel like, well, yeah, like tell me a little bit more about that because I want to know if there's like moments where you feel like it's so much anxiety that you can't really like think, and if so, that would probably be a good time to maybe pause it for like a couple of minutes just to kind of help or also like when you take your breaks, what do you usually do during the breaks? Because that can also like because there's like breathing exercises and things like that that can help with like the anxiety. So tell me, yeah, a little bit more about how you feel. Like, are you feeling like just a little bit anxious? Are you feeling like you can't breathe? You know, that kind of thing.
It's definitely not like a I can't breathe type of thing. I think because I feel like I'm just racing against the clock. I think like if I take longer than I need to on a particular passage, then for the next couple passages, I'm just like I'm not even reading to
Yeah.
understand. I'm just reading to like find information, which is not very helpful.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely that pattern. I think that's the most detrimental.
Did the timing checkpoints help?
Yeah, they did. And even in cars, I got through. That was like the first time that I got through like all the passages. Granted, I had to like guess on one for the most part, just because it was like pretty difficult, and I just was gonna waste my time on it.
Mhm.
But I feel like it was the first time where I felt like I understood the passages and was able to like get through the section in some like degree of confidence.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, yeah, although my accuracy was not as
Mhm.
good as I wanted it to be.
Got it. So, okay, so the checkpoints helped. You're saying that the anxiety that you felt wasn't ever like to the extent where you like couldn't breathe or anything, but it was more, I think, maybe like if you didn't understand a passage and you skipped it, and then you, when you're on that second passage or, you know, the passage that's after the one that you skipped, you feel like, oh crap, you know, I skipped that first one and now I'm not really understanding this one. Am I going to skip this one? And then it can make you feel kind of
Yeah, something along, yeah, I would say something
discouraged for
along.
the later tests, as for the later passages. Uh,
Yeah, that's probably more.
and what about like, you know, if a question takes too long, flagging it, how have you been for in trying that out?
I think when it comes down to, so for example, like Chem Phys, I feel like I'm more confident with Chem Phys. So
Mhm.
like I'll actually try to like figuring out the problem, and I have a tendency to like waste too much. So for example, like if if it's a question that I have to actually calculate things, like I'm just like, oh, like I know how to calculate this. So like I'm going to spend the time just to like get this answer. But then I mean, I remember I did this once. I don't think it wasn't this. I don't think it was this,
Mhm.
uh, but maybe the one before where I spent so much time on it because I knew what I had to do, and then I got an answer that was completely out. So I was like, oh, okay, well, this was just wasted now.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. I always say for the calculation problems, like that could be potentially a really big time sink because you feel like you know how to do it. It's just that, you know, maybe the first time you do it, like maybe the math isn't right. And so you feel like doing it again and over and over again. I mean, I've definitely been there. I remember on a test that I took, like the actual test, that I spent too much time on like a cars, sorry, not a cars, CP question.
mm,
And I spent so much time on it that I ran out of time with the last, two passages,
Mm,
and set of discretes, I wasn't able to do them, so I had to void my exam. So that's kind of where how I came up with that checkpoint idea. Mainly the one that says if you spend longer than a minute and a half to just guess, flag, and move on. And so if that's a calculation problem, do your calculation, and if it doesn't get you the answer, um, guess and flag and move on. Don't do
mm,
a calculation twice, because it's really easy to get into that mindset of, I know what to do. I'm just, maybe the math isn't right or whatever. And that
mhm,
can potentially take a really long period of time. I remember doing like the problem that I'm talking about that I spent a lot of time on. Like, I remember like after the test, I like looked up like what could have been the answer. It was a question about radioactive decay of radon, but I thought radon was Ra on the periodic table when it's really Rn. So I never would have gotten that question right anyway. So
mm.
that's, that's so yeah, I would say for like calculation problems, do your initial calculation. If that doesn't get you the answer, just guess, flag, move on, and and do that for anything that feels like it takes longer than a minute and a half, because if you can do that, then you should have some time at the very end to review flag questions, and then you can review the ones that you feel like would be the most bang for your buck, like either ones that you're really not certain about or things that won't take too long.
Mhm.
So, okay. So the feeling that you have sometimes is, if this is a hard passage, I'm going to skip it. And then when you move on to the next passage, it's hard for you to kind of, I guess, like focus on that next passage, because maybe it feels not good, like skipping a passage, and then maybe like the next passage, like the next two passages, it's harder for you to like get back into the zone. Is that kind of accurate to what you're feeling?
Yeah, or if I like spend too much time on a passage and I like then ultimately even have to skip some questions, then I'm kind of just like, oh, well, I
Yeah,
just wasted that time. Now I have to catch up and like speed through, which is not the solution, but
yeah,
it's kind of
yeah,
like tendency that I have. Yeah.
yeah. No, that's definitely for most people. So okay, let's see. Um,
I think like, and even to mention this, like I know it's not like I know enough content and like even the strategies that you've taught me, like I know that will put me in a position where I will have a good score. I think it's just like the rushing that's really like throwing off even my application of those strategies, I think. So
mhm.
like the biggest.
Yeah. Do you ever feel like it's easier to do like discretes first or anything like that? I mean, it might not be something that we should do for like the test that you have tomorrow, but
Mm,
I'm thinking if you're feeling the way that you feel about a passage, where if you skip it, the next passage, it's hard for you to kind of get back in the zone of reading the passage, and kind of like learning from it, because it could feel like reading a passage doesn't feel like you're doing work, because it's like you have to read it, and if you don't understand it and you end up skipping the questions anyway, like that's time that you can't get back. Whereas a discrete question you can do, and it won't be like or feel like you're wasting time with a passage, because you just have to read that question stem and then just do that question. So I'm thinking, if you're in the position again where you end up skipping a passage, and then the next passage, it's harder for you to kind of read and kind of pay attention to that next passage. And then if it happens again for the next, two passages, then maybe it would be good to answer some discretes, just so you can get your confidence back up, because, I mean, like theoretically, if you do all of the discretes first, um,
which is what I do already. I just, yeah, I do all the discretes first and then start doing
I
passages.
see, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, how do you feel about that? Because that means that you're finishing. I mean, it could mess with the checkpoints, the timing checkpoints, but
I did notice that, but I kind of like keep it in the back of my mind that like, oh, well, I might have X amount left, but I did some of those discrete, so like it's not as, yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that there's 15 discrete,
Yeah,
right?
I believe so, yeah.
That's around 25. That's like a quarter of the test, or the quarter of the section for the sciences. So if you do the discretes first, yeah.
Or I was gonna say I aim to like finish all the discretes by like at the by the hour 20 mark.
Okay.
Well, yeah.
Hour 20, okay. That's like 15 minutes then.
Yeah.
So let's see. Okay, I mean that's pretty fast. Because like 95, it's 95 minutes, right?
Hmm.
Science. So I just calculated like a quarter of that, which would be 23.75 minutes or 24 minutes. So if you're able to finish in 15 minutes, then that's really good. That puts you in a in a good state. But okay, but you're already doing that. So okay, let's
Yeah.
see. Um, yeah, okay. I'm trying to think, okay, what else could be something that we kind of, or is it, yeah, so I guess from the test that you took, if there's any, I mean, like, yeah, I know that you reviewed it, but I'm just thinking if there's any, or it, I'm thinking either two things. Like either we look at a passage or two from the test that you just took, and it's one of those passages that you kind of mentioned that you felt was like too difficult and that you skipped it. Maybe we can look at one of those and kind of think, or you can like kind of tell me how you approached it, or we can do like a new passage or something and kind of have it be like kind of like a test simulation, like you kind of just talk out loud or yeah, think out loud and kind of walk me through your thought process.
Okay. I mean, so the ones that passages in this past full length, none of them, I think maybe one of them, my breakdown was kind of off and it kind of threw off like some of my maybe like an answer to, but really there was only one passage where like I had that issue. The other ones, when I was able to like get through it, I was answering them pretty well. So I mean, we could potentially look at that one, maybe. Um,
And also for CP, a lot of the questions can be thought of as pseudo discrete. So if you are running out of time for like a CP passage, you can try answering or attacking the questions first and then kind of going back to the passage like as you see fit. That's just harder to do for the other sections though.
yeah, I would agree. I would agree.
So would you say that that's mostly like the content stuff regarding experimental design?
Psych um, I suppose, and I think making predictions as well is not something that I'm struggling with for Psych Because I think, I mean, in terms of content,
Wait, when you
like
say predictions, what do you mean?
so like if they were to like I guess predicting trends in like
Mhm.
I guess like behavior in different research contexts.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Or different experiments. Um
I know that psych soc on the actual test is generally going to be pretty hard because they know that psych soc is the section that people can do their best in. Because I think I showed you like the breakdown or whatever for the percentiles. Like psych soc has the highest like mean score. So to counteract that, they'll probably throw in a lot of because psych soc could be good for people in that if they know the content, it's mostly that it's less like critical thinking, more content. But
mhm.
it can also work against you because if you don't know something, it's hard to figure it out. Whereas for like CP and biochem, you can kind of figure things out if you don't know like specifically the content involved. But for psych soc, that can be more tough. And I know that yeah, whenever I would review my tests for psych soc, I would just make Anki cards for new the vocab and like the terms and all that stuff. Especially with experimental design. That's where psych could get a little tough.
Mhm.
Where you yeah, where you have to know like a little bit of like statistics. You need to know a little bit of yeah, like the many different types of studies and you know types of variables and things like that.
I think that's definitely where. I'm trying to find which passage.
Mhm. Oh, and did you find most like that you did well in most of the discrete questions?
Yeah, I do pretty solid in discretes.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So I think it was. I'll share my screen. Just yeah, and then maybe it could be also helpful that like I just do the entire breakdown, and then like once I start like answering questions, or maybe like at the very end, then you could kind of give your
Mhm.
I don't like maybe something I could do better. Then I'm gonna join on my other device so I can like also write. Show you. This is
Okay, so when you read these, do you do that proportionality thing that we talked about, or what do you
yeah,
do?
I did the proportionality for this one.
Okay.
Also, it's I think I'm my other device is in the waiting room, I think, for the Zoom call. There we go.
Recording in progress.
All right. Good. So, so what I would do is I'm like reading this, and I think the first thing that I do is like I would say, okay, well, CCK.
Yeah. So I would say, yeah, if you can read it out loud and kind of what and think out loud and tell me uh what they're saying, and also if you see those like buzzwords to also tell me about those.
Okay, so CCK is a peptide hormone. Off the bat, I want to highlight that just to like orient myself.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's a buzzword because what other types of hormones could exist?
steroid, steroid hormone. I mean, I know peptide is water soluble, so
And the steroids, what would they look like?
um, what would they look like? Oh, they have is it three rings?
I think it'll be
Or is
four,
it four? There we go.
something like that.
Yeah, it's fat soluble.
Yeah, because it's from What are all steroid hormones based on?
Cholesterol.
On what?
Cholesterol.
Yep. Yeah. So yeah, it'll be three of these like cyclohexanes and then one like pentane. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's going to be fat soluble, so it could just travel right through the cell membrane, and some of them could even travel through the nuclear membrane.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. And this was first isolated from the small intestine. Whereas its release is stimulated by the presence of food. So the first thing that I would like write is like, okay, let's say food stimulating CCK.
Perfect.
And once secreted by the small intestine, CCK facilitates digestion by releasing into the duodenum bile from the gallbladder and pancreatic juices rich in enzymes. So I would just then put, okay, well, CCK, digestion.
Well,
Second?
so I don't think I would put digestion because
Okay.
it's pretty general. But what else could we put?
Mm,
Because it tells you how it facilitates digestion, right?
yeah, so maybe like pancreatic enzymes, is that what you're implying?
So where are the things that it's releasing going into?
Duodenum.
Uh-huh. And what is it releasing into that?
Pancreatic juices.
Anything else?
Um, hmm,
Bile from the
oh,
gallbladder.
right, got you. Okay. Yeah.
So I would say like um the CCK would be proportional to bile from the gallbladder, into the duodenum. And also let's say like amylase and trypsin from the pancreas, right? So like, sure, it facilitates digestion, but we want to know like specifically what components that entails.
Mm-hmm.
It says, by releasing into the duodenum bile from the gallbladder. So bile from the gallbladder goes into the duodenum, and CCK helps that happen. And pancreatic juices rich in these enzymes. So the enzymes from the pancreas also enters into the duodenum, and that's also what CCK does.
Okay. So if in my head I already know, because like I feel like I'm pretty like familiar with the digestive system. So
Mhm.
like I think in my head when I put digestion, it's almost like implicit that like that's part of it. And so
Mhm.
I think to save time, I probably wouldn't write all that. But what do you think? I mean, maybe I could also be a reason why I'm missing some things.
Yeah, I think it could be. I mean, the way that I'm seeing it is kind of the other way around. If I know that it's releasing bile from the gallbladder into the duodenum, and if we're releasing amylase and trypsin from the pancreas into the duodenum, then in my head I'm saying this all helps with digestion.
Mhm.
So I would rather the part that says facilitates digestion to have that in my head
Mhm.
rather than the specific things from the bile and amylase and trypsin and stuff, because if they didn't mention that stuff, then it's fine. Maybe we could just write digestion, but since they're mentioning it as a specific thing, Because when I think of digestion, I think of a ton of different things that can happen. Not specifically, bile coming in from the gallbladder into the duodenum, or the amylase and trypsin coming in from the pancreas into the duodenum. At least for me, that doesn't come to be something that I think of right away when I think of digestion. So I would definitely say to write something specific like that, just because, well, you've seen in all these passages that they place a huge emphasis on enzymes and enzyme kinetics and enzyme function and stuff like that. And so things that help with that, like certain enzymes like amylase and trypsin, I would write down. Yeah. So I would say I would personally have the digestion part in my head without writing it down, and then the specific things that happen be the things that I write down.
Okay.
So, I mean, let's see what they ask us, but just so far, that's what I see, that I want to specifically acknowledge. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. In addition to its role in facilitating digestion in the small intestine, CCK is also known to trigger satiety centers within the brain upon ingestion of food, and thereby induce a sensation indicating that enough food has been eaten. So I remember writing down that I wrote like another thing that basically put like, I think I put satiety centers, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would maybe say something like, well, I probably wouldn't write anything down for this, but that's just because in my head, I'm thinking not particularly with the satiety centers, but feeling of fullness.
Yeah, and I think yeah, I know what you mean, and I think like in my head I kind of remind myself that like that's the reason, like that's the connection essentially.
Mhm.
So maybe I mean, I feel like there's no way of writing that without like writing too much, I think. So that's why I think I kind of just put.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to specify that. But yeah, I would just put something that would help me write down, just that in addition to all of this, in addition to helping digestion happen in the small intestine, that it helps you feel full, something like that. I mean, if they specified like leptin or something, or ghrelin, are you familiar with those?
I mean, I saw it in a passage. I remember it.
Yeah, so leptin is what's released, that gives you a feeling that you're full, and ghrelin is
Like,
something that could be released that tell your brain that you're hungry. But they didn't specify that. If they did, I would have definitely written proportional to that and stuff. But it just kind of generally saying that. So yeah, I would just put something like feeling full, something like that.
okay, so it's like okay for me to like add this in this proportionality,
Mhm.
even though it's not like a okay.
Yep.
Okay, the pathway whereby CCK activates brain satiety centers appears to involve CCK stimulation of vagal afferent fibers.
Mm-hmm.
I remember writing, let me reread this real quick. Okay, so it involves, so I think I wrote another proportionality, I think like right underneath,
Mm-hmm.
I think I wrote it like here maybe or something like that. And I just put like
Yep.
vagal fibers. I think I put
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, now I have something specific that they're telling me, like not just saying it makes you feel full, but it's telling you how it's doing that by stimulating the vagal afferent fibers. So yeah, I would put something down like what you put, or like just vagal something. Um, what's afferent mean?
means that like sensory neurons are sending signals to the brain, so going up.
Yeah, so it's going like to the CNS or the spinal cord rather than away from. So it's kind of like, oh yeah. So what's the other type?
Efferent.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be like moving away.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
It says that it provides a negative feedback signal to the brain
Mhm.
that leads to feeding inhibition.
Mhm.
Okay. I don't think I ended up writing any specific proportionality.
Oh, I thought you wrote like a minus here.
I think what I did was I put 1 over VAF, like the first time that I was breaking down this passage.
Okay. You could probably connect it to the satiety centers that you have down because that's what you wrote uh to describe like the feeling of being full.
Okay.
So that
And
could,
so if something like so in this case, because it's negative feedback, you would just put like the minus sign in your, or how would you do?
so the satiety centers here, like that, you put that down to indicate the feeling of being full.
Mhm.
And I would just tack on to that, like the
Oh, the okay, put that down. Gotcha.
because we're essentially saying the satiety centers are being or CCK helps through the mechanism of vagal afferent fibers make you feel full. And if you wrote satiety centers to mean feeling full, then I would connect that to the vagal thing.
Gotcha.
So like if you wrote like fullness, then I would connect that to the vagal afferent fiber. Mhm.
Activation of this pathway is thought to account for the significant reduction in the size and duration of meals that is observed in a variety of species, including humans, in response to exogenous CCK administration.
Okay, what do they mean by exogenous?
I'm not sure, actually.
So what's something that you see inside of that word?
So,
And what does exo mean?
I would say like outside,
Okay. So, and then what about the gen part?
like the creation of generation.
Yep. So exogenous, well, let's think about if we don't know exogenous, what would the opposite mean be?
The opposite of exogenous, endogenous.
Yes. So what could endogenous mean? Like let's say how about it was and so we have exogenous CCK. What do you think endogenous CCK would be?
So made within,
Mm-hmm.
essentially.
Yep. So exogenous would be CCK that you can give someone or some animal that they're not making themselves. If you just injected them with it, let's say.
Okay, I see.
Yeah. So like, if you haven't seen it before, you can just remember what I said about like did I tell you about like how like 60 I think percent of the English language is based on Greek and Latin?
No, I don't think you mentioned that.
Oh yeah. That's like when like romance languages.
Repeat that.
Oh yeah, do you know like romance languages? Like,
Yeah, like
oh,
female.
so that's just so that's like French, Spanish, Italian.
Mhm.
They're called romance languages because they're from Roman. They're like because like Rome had, they conquered Gaul in France, they conquered Spain, like before France was France and before Spain was Spain. And so people who spoke Latin, aka Roman people, lived in Italy and France and Spain. But when Rome fell, those regions started to become where civilization kind of went. And their languages come from Latin. So that's why they're called Romance languages. So they're all from Romans speaking Latin. So you can see that in those three languages, a lot of the terms are the same, or the words are the same. But yeah, that goes for English as well. Where most of the words come from Latin and Greek. So a lot of times that can help you. And usually you don't need to have a detailed understanding of like what's Latin for exo or whatever, but you know from other words, right? That exo means outside, gen means like the start of, like Genesis and stuff. So exogenous would mean coming from an outside source.
Gotcha. Okay.
So this pathway, so maybe we could say like either what you have for CCK or something like exo CCK proportional to I guess, or inversely proportional to like meal size, perhaps. But it's still pretty much what you have down already. It's just that it's telling us that this happens, this pathway of feeling full through the vagus like nerve can result in people having, or animals having, smaller amount or size of the meal and duration of the meal. Yeah.
Okay. So I mean, I'm pretty sure. So like if I were to put that proportionality as 1 over VAF, it wouldn't be correct. Because I think in my head I'm saying like, okay, well, because it has to do with like the fullness, right? So like the more you're eating, the less CCK you would have.
Yeah, I think I just put it as something separate just to show that it could be a more direct relationship, even though it's done through stimulating the vagus afferent fiber. I guess I would just put something that helped me see, I guess, something that's specific, like, because we know that CCK, whether it's endogenous or exogenous, should cause you to feel full, which should result in an inverse proportion with the size of your meal and the duration of your meal. So you can really just tack it on to all this other stuff that we say CCK does, but maybe I'll just put in parentheses exogenous or exo just to help me see that there's a definite kind of relationship between the two that gets highlighted in the condition of adding CCK from outside the body.
And I think that distinction is the reason why I got this question wrong. 37. Yeah, but I mean we'll get there after. Okay, so last paragraph. Scientists have hypothesized that abnormalities in CCK secretion may occur in patients with bulimia nervosa. Okay, so abnormalities in CCK. So if we have like, let me see. So if CCK function is like being reduced in some way or like changed, then this could result in.
Yeah, I don't know yet if it's going up or down, but yeah, definitely changing.
That's what I put back on.
Yeah.
So would it be appropriate to say, okay, well, if CCK was like inhibited, it would lead to bulimia?
I think so far we don't know. They just said abnormalities, but we are likely going to know after we probably get get through the passage, get through this paragraph, or see in the figure. So
So bulimic individuals consume abnormally large amounts of food in one sitting, and then later purge the food from their bodies, usually by vomiting. To test this hypothesis, CCK responses to a meal were assessed in non-bulimic and bulimic subjects. Figure 1 shows the mean response. So I wouldn't look at it until the question asked me directly, just to save time.
Oh, so I would say to definitely look at it, maybe not for a long period of time like we normally do. Like I would say like maybe 15-20 seconds to kind of get what it's saying, but I would definitely look at it before the questions, just because we don't know yet, right? If it means that CCK causes something to happen, or if it's the lack of CCK that causes something to happen, because so far we just know that there's abnormalities in the secretion. But that's what they're doing the experiment for, and the figure should probably tell us specifically if it's CCK causing it or lack of CCK. But we don't know that yet just from this paragraph, because they just said abnormalities, right? So let's look at the figure. So they say that it's CCK levels after a meal in non-bulimic, which is the control, and bulimic subjects. And what do you see? What do you see here?
So bulimic subjects just have relatively low levels of.
Yep. So what used to be an abnormality, which didn't tell us if it was going to be high amount of CCK associated with bulimia or low amount. Now, from the figure, we know that it's a low amount, right? So maybe we can even say like CCK is inversely proportional to like bulimia or bulimics. So now we have a definite understanding of whether it's high amounts of CCK that's abnormal or low amounts of CCK that's abnormal, and it's low amounts, right? So
Okay.
seems to be, I mean, at least after the meal, right? Because prior to the meal, it's the same amount of CCK. After the meal, the amount of CCK goes up for the controls, and goes up for bulimics too, but not as much as it goes up for the controls. So we can say that bulimics have their abnormality in CCK secretion is that they do not produce enough of it. So that's something that we can take away from that figure and the experiment. And now we pretty much know everything that they mentioned, that they can ask questions on.
Okay. First question, the information of the passage best supports the hypothesis that which of the following defects accounts for excessive eating by people who have bulimia?
Yep.
Yeah, the first time I put A, because I thought that they were like directly related, in that like if we had I mean, I think I remember going back to the passage and reading, okay, well, what does it mean? Like, how does VAF kind of play the role? And so in my head, I was thinking like, okay, well, the only way that we would be able to activate the satiety centers was if these afferent fibers were also stimulated. So if we weren't able to.
Yeah. So we know a couple of things, right? We know that CCK can lead to bile coming into the duodenum from the gallbladder. We know that it can cause the pancreatic enzymes to come in to the duodenum as well. We know that the feeling of feeling full can come from stimulation of the VAF. But since they're talking about this the hypothesis that there's abnormalities in CCK that can account for people who have bulimia, that can help us narrow down our search to what they found out about CCK secretion abnormalities in bulimia. So we don't know from this experiment anything really about either the bile from the gallbladder entering into the duodenum, about the pancreatic enzymes, or the stimulation of VAF. We don't know about so we know those things could be associated with higher amounts of CCK, but yeah, we don't know anything else about those specific kind of components that come along with CCK, whereas we know that for bulimics, they have a smaller amount of CCK that's released into their, into their bloodstream after a meal, right?
Mhm.
So okay, let me put it this way. A is saying that fewer CCK sensitive vagal afferent nerves. So that's saying that if that was the case, right? That means that the link between CCK stimulating the VAF, that this choice is saying that there's less of the VAF that could be sensitive to the CCK. So that means that we're essentially like breaking off that part. Like we're kind of making it so the vagal afferent fiber, not enough of them are going to be stimulated from CCK.
Which would mean that there would be higher CCK.
Yeah, or at least that there's not a lower amount of CCK.
Right.
Right? Because it's something that's getting messed up downstream of CCK, right? And just like B, right? Well, I guess B would be like the opposite. But I mean, if it said decreased bile release in response to CCK, that would be very similar to what A is saying. It's saying that something gets messed up downstream from CCK, right? So, but that's not something that we can tell is happening. All we can tell is happening is less CCK is getting released. So B is another thing that's just downstream of it. And you could have also had something that said, either excess or decreased amylase and trypsin are released, from the pancreas. That's also downstream of CCK, right?
Yeah.
We don't have enough information to definitively say that that's what's changing. What we do have is definitive evidence that shows that bulimics after a meal have less plasma CCK than the controls.
I see. Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
Okay, so drawing that distinction between things that are downstream. Okay, that's huge.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so for this one, did you look at like this figure?
I can't remember, to be honest. I feel like I probably did. I think I probably did, but I think the biggest thing was like that downstream distinction, I think. Because I knew that it was decreasing the CCK levels for bulimics.
Yeah.
It just wasn't apparent to me like why that was.
Yeah. We don't know why, right? But all we know is that the people who are at bulimia have less CCK released after they eat a meal.
Gotcha.
So I just want to make sure that it wasn't something that because when you went over this, you kind of you didn't go over like this figure and you kind of went to the question. So I was wondering did you read the question and then go back to the figure, or were you thinking of something other than that?
Yeah, I think I read the question and went back to the figure once it.
Okay. Yep.
But I definitely saw the figure.
Mhm.
But in that case, I mean, based on our breakdown, it sounds like C makes the most sense because that's the only thing that can't be
Mhm.
proven. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure like all the other questions were pretty straightforward.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I'll keep that in mind. That makes sense. But I think in that case, I mean, I feel like my breakdown when I initially wrote it was still like fine the way it was. I think my breakdown was like good enough to answer the questions.
Mhm.
Correct. I think it was just that distinction that.
Mhm. Yeah.
Let me see. There's also I wanted to go over like we can briefly go over psych soc section.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think I mean I think I just was I was just not locked in the very beginning of this exam.
Mhm. But you're
Say again?
not what?
I just like was not like focused in the
Oh,
very I can like feel that. I had to like actually tell myself to like, okay, let me calm
yeah.
down.
Yeah. Yeah, I could feel like that for once you get to psych, so she kind of just wanted to end.
Yeah, it's oh my gosh. It's like once you finish biology, it's like, okay, another 90 minutes, let's go.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think I mean, psych social isn't hard to like get through the readings and stuff.
Yeah.
It's just I find that the very minute details, I find that I miss, like if I'm just like reading too fast or something.
Yeah.
But I mean, I get through the section with like ample time. So
Yeah.
okay, so how do you usually go about psych soc passages? Do you kind of do like read them the way that you usually would for like any other
Yeah.
um
Yeah. I would do it like similar to how we would do biochem, like look for buzzwords and write out proportionalities and yeah, things like that.
okay. What I will say for psych soc, I like never write anything. So maybe that's something I should do.
Yeah.
Um
Sometimes, you can get away with like highlighting things because like it's the proportionality stuff is really useful in biochem because there's so many acronyms that are hard to keep track of. But in psych soc, it's easier to keep track of things because they're not usually using acronyms like that.
yeah.
So yeah, you can probably get away with highlighting and stuff as well.
So psychopathic individuals differ from controls in terms of how they process and experience emotions. Specifically, research has shown that psychopaths have difficulty in recognizing emotional facial expressions. Okay, so I would say recognizing emotional facial expressions. I'm already thinking of like the 5 different
Universal. Yeah.
yeah. When anticipating an aversive event, PS fail to show increased skin conductivity. That is typical in controls, and they are less likely to exhibit the startle response when presented with fear-inducing pictures. In lexical decision tasks,
Oh, so prior to that, would you highlight anything else or?
hmm, I think maybe like fear-inducing pictures.
So for instance, like you highlighted here, emotional facial expressions as something that psychopaths have a hard time with.
Mhm.
So if you're highlighting that, let's highlight the other things that they have a hard time with, like skin conductivity
Sure.
and startle response.
Okay.
Like I know that it's in response to either an aversive event or fear-inducing pictures, but just going by what you highlighted with emotional facial expressions, you're probably in your head filling in the blank of that they have difficulty with that. So what else do they have difficulty with? Skin conductivity, which is essentially like sweating, right?
Yeah.
And the startle response, it's like, if you get startled, it's like, it's like, whoa, like you're kind of scared like right away.
Yeah.
But they're less likely to have that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. When presented with fear-inducing pictures.
Mhm.
I think the reason why I made the mention of fear-inducing pictures is because I'm like thinking of like, okay, maybe like conditioning now, potentially, or something that could potentially last kind of
Condition. Oh, you mean
as it relates to like fear-inducing pictures, like
tell me more about, sorry, what do you mean about conditioning?
so I'm kind of like I guess I'm making a prediction that the fact that they mentioned fear-inducing pictures, they could like have an experiment where like they pair particular like emotions with these pictures in some capacity. Maybe that's just like something that's coming up in my head. Might not be true, but that's
But
just
when I say conditioning, I'm just trying to think what you mean by that.
how more so like classical and like you're pairing.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
In lexical decision tasks, which ask participants to decide whether a string of letters is a word. PS respond similarly to emotional and non-emotional words, whereas controls tend to respond more quickly to emotional words. Okay. When they begin bringing up like or so I guess in this case we're comparing two different groups of people who have the disease and who don't, or the mental illness. Are you making a like proportionality or like comparison in some case in that sense, or are you kind of just like putting that in the back of your head?
Yeah, I think I'm just putting it into the highlights.
Okay.
So, because yeah, I could write like inversely or proportional, uh, but I think we can get away with highlights here because also like writing it out could be a little long compared to this. But I think if you're able to put it in terms of the highlights, then that's pretty fine. So for this, I would highlight, or what would you highlight for this sentence you just read?
Um, like a string of letters is a word.
So, um, so since so far we highlighted things that the psychopaths are different in,
Mhm.
we can, for this task as well, highlight how psychopaths differ. And so how do they differ here?
So they react differently when it comes to emotional and non-emotional words.
Do they?
Uh, I mean, I guess the difference is they don't respond and controls do respond more. So I guess that's the difference.
Or that so psychopaths respond similarly to emotional and non-emotional words, whereas controls respond more quickly to emotional words.
Yeah. So as it relates to like, so I guess between non-emotional and emotional words, then I
Mhm.
guess that's what I mean, not necessarily between.
Wait, sorry, say that again.
So like for um psychopaths, how they respond to emotional and non-emotional is the same. Like they respond in both settings the same way.
Yep. Yeah. So, and then controls would be more quickly to emotional words. So if you highlighted, this, that would be consistent with the three things over here as well.
Okay.
So
then
yep.
I'll say, would you recommend like, I guess, sticking to a consistent, like, I don't want to say topic, but like category of things associated to whatever the subject is?
Yeah. In this case, it would be that you're highlighting things that are unique in psychopaths compared to the regular control.
Okay.
That's why I would highlight like similarly to emotional and non-emotional words. And since you're being consistent with what you're highlighting as being things that psychopaths are different from regular people, then it would be consistent. So yeah, I would highlight like similarity to emotional and non-emotional words. Yeah. So,
And you do
so
this
far,
pretty,
yeah.
I
What's
said
up?
you do this pretty consistently across the different passages, like whenever they.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so psychopaths also differ from controls in their ability to inhibit responses that lead to aversive consequences.
Yeah.
In a study designed to test avoidance learning in psychopaths, a group of incarcerated male criminals were screened for psychopathy, and the ones that were identified as psychopaths were recruited to participate in this study. All the participants were presented with 10 numbers in random order. 5 of the numbers were associated with reward, such that presenting the button after the presentation of these 5 numbers resulted in the participant receiving a monetary incentive. So they're associating like these numbers with incentives. The remaining 5 numbers were associated with electric shock, such that pressing the button after the presentation of these 5 numbers resulted in the participant receiving an electric shock. The study results showed that psychopaths were much less likely than controls to inhibit responses and to acquire avoidance learning.
So yeah, what are they doing in this? And kind of like describe to me what this experiment is doing and how people are responding compared to psychopaths.
So essentially they're associating like these numbers with either a ward or like with an electric shock, something that they don't like. And then they're comparing those who are psychopaths to controls to see like how their responses will be inhibited or not, or whether or not they would be inhibited or not, and to acquire this avoidance learning that they.
And what do they find?
Psychopaths are less likely.
So are they more likely to punch in the numbers that give them electroshocks?
I don't think it says so. I mean, well, let's see. I mean, is that what they mean when they say they're less likely to inhibit responses?
Yeah, and we have avoidance learning here. What's avoidance learning?
It's to avoid.
Yeah, so they did this. So they were like, okay, psychopaths differ from controls in that in their ability to inhibit responses that lead to aversive consequences, right? So what that means is, well, so then they did the study to test avoidance learning, which is learning how to inhibit responses that lead to aversive consequences, right? But we're being told that the psychopaths have a hard time learning that.
Yeah.
And so something that kind of also helps me is I kind of imagine being a participant to help me kind of imagine or visualize like how the experiment is constructed. So I'm just imagining like okay, they're giving me 5 numbers that I have to I think repeat or something. And they could give me a monetary incentive, and then some of the numbers give you an electric shock. So I'm gonna think, all right, I don't want that electric shock. I'd rather have a monetary incentive. So I'm going to be very careful about the numbers that I pick. But a psychopath is much less likely than controls to inhibit, I'm reading the end here, inhibit responses and to acquire avoidance learning. So a psychopath would be like, okay, like 5, 6, or whatever, give me the monetary incentive. And then the numbers that lead to electric shocks, they're not going to be very good about stopping themselves and saying, okay, I'm not going to choose this number because it will give me a shock. It's kind of saying that the psychopath will like get the shock and not learn to avoid it. And constantly, say the number that will give them that shock. So essentially I would come away from this passage with the following understanding. So psychopaths have difficulty in recognizing emotional facial expressions. They don't show an increase in skin conductivity that is associated with like it's like when you're like sweating and you're nervous and stuff. And also their psychopaths have less of that startle response, and that they respond similarly to emotional and non-emotional words. And lastly, that they have more difficulty in inhibiting responses that lead to aversive or bad consequences. So, and then they actually carried out an experiment where they, associated some numbers with a monetary incentive and some numbers with an electric shock. And the psychopaths were pretty bad at being able to learn avoidance learning, like how to avoid that electric shock. They're worse at that. So I would come away with just that, with those things that separate psychopaths from regular people. And then the one thing that separates them from regular people that they also made an experiment for. So that's what I would take away.
Okay.
Yeah. Is that like, how did you, what did you come out of this passage with when you read it?
I think I have a habit of like just compartmentalizing, or maybe not even more so compartmentalizing, but just like seeing or looking for the subject of like an experiment, and then looking for like the outcomes, but not necessarily like tying the two together until it explicitly asks.
When you say subject, do you mean like topic, or do you mean like the person who's undergoing the test?
So like in this case, like the psychopaths.
Oh, okay.
Like
Yeah, so you're saying the difference between the subject and the what?
So in the first paragraph, it mentions like, okay, well, there's these differences between like psychopaths and people who don't, right? And then in the experiment, they are then like trying to figure out, okay, well, to what extent is this the case? Like I tend to kind of just compartmentalize the subjects, in this case, the psychopaths, to like, okay, well, this is like what they experience. And then I'm just like focusing on the experiment, not necessarily drawing that connection between reasons why that's the case, I guess. from a biological standpoint or psychological standpoint rather.
Got
Yeah. So yeah, I think maybe that's just something that I need to like practice doing more,
it. Mm-hmm.
finding myself to do more.
Yeah. Yeah. If it helps, to put yourself in the position of someone that's in the study, that can really help. It could also help if you put yourself in the position of the person who made the study or carries out the study. But I think for me, it helps me to imagine myself as a participant. Um, that's usually how I feel about most passages that involve like an experiment or a study or something like that. But okay, so cool. So at least we can come out with those certain things, and yeah, I would just highlight them like you did over here, because I mean in biochem I would highlight, but it's just so full of acronyms, it's hard to do that. But in this, it's not full of acronyms, and so it would take longer to like write it out than to just highlight. So yeah, I would just highlight. But as long as you come out with that type of, what we talked about in terms of what to come out of at least this passage. But okay, cool. So let's try this question out. They're asking what graph describes the relative performance of psychopaths and controls on that lexical decision task. And before we look at that, what should we be looking for?
So in the passage it mentions that like psychopaths respond similarly to emotional and non-emotional words.
Mhm.
So we should see less deviation in that group as opposed to the controls that have
Mhm.
more varied responses.
Yeah. And when it comes to the response, like what is it measuring? Like, is it measuring what the response is, or is it measuring like what would they be measuring, I guess? As like a whatever, dependent variable, I guess.
It says that more quickly, so I think like maybe time.
Yeah. So okay, so we want to see something that shows in terms of time, emotional and non-emotional for the psychopaths should be similar time, right? And then for the controls, you should see less time for the
Oh, I was gonna answer your question. I don't know if you were asking me or not.
Yep.
Yeah, control should have like a less time for the emotional words.
Exactly. Okay.
So off the bat, I mean, I'm just looking for
Mhm.
okay, so similar, but emotional words is what we're kind of focused on. It looks like it's this one.
Mm-hmm. Yep. For the control, emotional words should take less time. For the psychopath, same time.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay, which experimental procedure would establish that psychopaths differ from controls only in avoidance learning, but perform similarly to controls in other types of operant conditioning? Okay, well, keyword is operant conditioning. So I think my first what's the word? Like my first instinct is to just like look for a choice that's represents operant conditioning.
Yeah.
Okay. On a word learning task in which they receive a monetary reward for every time they provide the correct response. Sounds solid. B, on a task that requires watching a model perform a series of physical actions and repeating them in the correct order. That's not operant conditioning. A procedure in which the participants are presented with a light followed by a drop of lemon juice. This is classical. In a procedure in which the participants are presented with a word list and tested. Yeah, no. So it would have to be a.
Yep. Because we want to find something that they're going to perform similarly to controls, which they're saying is just another type of operant conditioning. And we know that they suck at, avoidance learning, which is learning to stop doing things that lead to bad consequences. We know that they're bad for that, but for the monetary incentive, they should be fine. So, yep.
It's not letting me click this.
That's weird. What about clicking there?
So,
All right, that's weird.
yeah, I don't know why.
All right. I'm pretty sure you're right. So
Yeah. Based on the information regarding the differences between psychopaths and controls, when anticipating aversive events and viewing fear-inducing pictures, it is likely that the two groups differ in. Let me see. Okay, so basically they're asking like what, like biological. Okay, it's definitely not occipital, it's not periodal. Definitely sympathetic, because that's the fight or flight.
Yep.
Okay, well, now it works. Let's see if this works now. Nope. I guess it's just two. Right. So the numbers were presented to the participants in the avoidance study function as how the numbers were associated with reward. Just that pressing the button after the presentation. So there were, I mean, some of the numbers were associated with reward. Some of them were associated with something that they don't want. So it's definitely not B. I remember the first time I did this, I put D because I didn't even spend much time like thinking about it. I think it was one of those questions where I thought I knew the answer, and then I was like, okay, D, and move on. But yeah, but in the experiment, the numbers weren't being paired per se, because I mean there were different numbers too. So it's not like numbers are like causing this per se. So I guess that's kind of like the distinction. Yeah. But how would you kind of define the difference between discriminating and unconditioned?
yeah. So I mean, so first I would eliminate reinforcers and punishers because some of the numbers are like reinforcing like the monetary incentive, and then some of the numbers are leading to punishment. So yeah, you got rid of that. Those two, that's good. Then unconditioned stimuli. I guess that would be something that will give you like it would give you some type of response, right? Like, and if you keep presenting those numbers, it should give you a response that you can associate with those numbers. But what the numbers are in this experiment are, well, some of the numbers are associated with a bad thing, some of the numbers are associated with something good. So the task of the participant is to figure out or to act differently for certain numbers and differently for some certain other numbers.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's going to be unconditioned stimulus because we don't have an unconditioned response. I mean, it could be argued that the unconditioned response would be, I guess, yeah, we can't really have that because we could have a conditioned response, which would lead to our participant choosing the ones or the numbers that are associated with monetary incentive, but that would be a conditioned that would be a conditioned response. So yeah, so I don't think it'll be unconditioned stimulus because that would be like I don't know, like something like in like a dog to make it salivate or something. But yeah, I would say because the numbers are gonna lead to very different things that they're discriminating stimuli because you need to know which numbers like are good and which numbers are bad, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fair. Okay. Well, this is also not. But I know it's discriminating stimuli. I get that.
Yep.
Yeah, I think what's your like overall advice in terms of approaching like questions that are very much grounded in the experimental design and
Mhm.
like because some of the questions even ask you like, oh well, in the event that they want you or they're looking for a different outcome, like what should change in order for that to like
Mhm.
be the and I think I have a hard time with those sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would use some like I don't know if you're using any specific type of resource for like the psych soc stuff, um but like psych soc, like there's like that 300-page document or whatever.
Yeah, I have that. Yeah.
So yeah, I would just look for all of the stuff related to experimental design and to cover that material, because like you said that they'll like to ask you a lot of things about it, and also when you reviewed like this section and when you reviewed the other psych social sections, you can kind of take notes or make Anki cards for like the experimental design stuff, but you could also use like a shared deck like either miles down to go over that. I know the Mr. Pankow deck also has a lot of really useful psych social terms, so that could be useful for you to get just to do like a couple of maybe like an hour or two of it like today. But I think for the most part, if you learned from the review that you did, um, just to, I guess, place an emphasis on, making sure that you know all of the psych social terms that can show up in like the question choices and stuff.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and then let's see.
Yeah, because I'm pretty good with my terms, but I like this particular
Mhm.
just like did not have.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, maybe look up. Let's see, like experimental design stuff, and all of the terms associated with, yeah, MCAT experimental design.
Okay.
Here's a link, but there's going to be tons of other stuff as well. So let me give you like a series of links. Here's another one. Here's third, and then here's a fourth. But so yeah, I would go over all these things from these links, and if you wanted to learn more about one of those specific things, you can just, kind of Google MCAT like psychosocial experimental design and kind of, make sure you get like the different types of studies, like the purpose of different types of studies, and how they differ and what the drawbacks are for certain types of experiments and limitations, and then what the drawbacks are for different ones, and knowing like the different variables, like, or rather the like confounding variable, moderating variable, mediating variable, know those, and then know like what examples you can use for those to help you kind of remember that. And also in the shared drive, I have like a huge kind of study um spreadsheet. It's like the S tier study creation. So here's oops.
Yeah, it's in the drive.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, I have a lot of stuff in the behavioral sciences and psych theories and development timelines. I have a lot of that stuff in the shared drive. So I would just like kind of maybe spend like an hour or 2 hours today just kind of going over all of these different psychosocial terms and just have them kind of ready for tomorrow when you take your test. And in the first like 15 minutes of your test where you do like the tutorial, you can kind of use that time to brain dump stuff onto like the scrap sheet that you get
Okay.
to maybe help you put some stuff down that's in your short-term memory that you don't trust that you'll have down for like the test.
Mhm.
That could just help. Um, they give you like a really crappy dry erase board and pens, so I would ask for like a couple of those pens just because they dry out really easily. They're pretty bad. Um,
Yeah, I noticed that too. Yeah.
so I would ask for like a good amount of those pens and stuff. But but yeah, I think for the most part, for the psychosocial at least, you just have to make sure you get these terms down. And know as much of the content as possible for your test. And then for the other sections, it's more so strategy. Or rather, yeah, I guess like more so strategy, less so like knowing everything content wise. But yeah, I would just like I guess do those things. And then for the breaks, what do you like to do for the breaks?
Um, I mean, I would like go to the restroom, like just walk around.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess, tell yourself during the break, okay, the section that I just did, it's over. No, nothing can change that. Don't think about it. Easier
Mhm.
said than done, but just use the breaks to kind of mentally prepare yourself for the next section. Um, and then yeah, like that everyone gets a little feeling of like excitement when BB is over because it feels like it's over, but you don't want to you want to remind yourself, hey, it's one more section. Let's pay attention to that. And yeah, I think you'll do a great job. I think you have good practice and you kind of know of like a way to approach these passages and stuff. And how to write out proportionalities and things like that. And not to spend too much time on any one question or any one passage, especially if it's like a math question, try your math, see if it works. If it doesn't, guess flag. Don't do another calculation because it's the time that it takes is not going to be worth it for the points that the question has. And it's just one point. So, you know, you can find other questions that are also 1 point, but not as difficult or time uh consuming. So I think
Mhm.
it'll help. And then I think all of that stuff will help. Yeah, go to bed like good 2 hours earlier than usual because people always have time or have a hard time falling asleep. Um, and you know, get up and maybe like I don't know what you like to do when you get up, but whatever makes you or will give you energy. So I guess, eat like a good breakfast, bring some snacks for the breaks, and yeah, and I guess do some Anki. Just kind of do like some passive review today. But yeah, go to bed early. And yeah, I think that should be it. Yeah.
For cars, what I notice is like when I take my time and go through like the passage and the questions, my accuracy um goes up immensely. But I just like I'm not
Hmm.
the speed or the like 10 minutes per passage thing is just not
Hmm. Yeah.
worth
If you feel like the benefit you gain from the pace that you're at is really going to lead you to getting the majority of those questions right, then maybe it's okay to like sacrifice a passage. But
Mhm.
the passage that you sacrifice, if you read it already, it's kind of like you spent the time to read it already. So you might be better for you to like end up doing the questions for that. But I think that if if you are at a pace where you can kind of almost, I don't want to say guarantee, but almost make sure that most of the stuff that you are going to get uh right, then yeah, it could make sense to spend that time for that one passage and take it away from another one.
Mhm.
But I think that you should be good for all of the passages now that you're just aware of the, because for the latest test that you took, you didn't really run out of time, did you? Like maybe, I mean, extra time would have helped, but it doesn't seem like you're like running out of time. So
So what I will say is like, I felt really good going through the passages at the speed that I was, because I felt like, I mean, I was doing, I was implementing like what we went over in that, like I'm like reminding myself of like what's the main purpose, etc. And so through that, I was able to understand the passage better that way. So I felt more comfortable with the questions. But I think the issue was because I would take like 6 minutes to read the passage and understand, then I'm going through the questions and kind of like basically I'm just rushing through the questions and I'm not
Mhm.
not really, there's no time to double check, which I usually find myself getting to the right answer once I like start double checking and like making sure, okay, like this is in fact right and this is in fact wrong, type thing.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, for the questions that you're not 100% certain of, you can take your educated guess and move on. And then when you have time at the end, if you have time at the end, you can go over those. Um, and like kind of, yeah, just go over the ones that you think would be the best to go over. But yeah, if you're saying that, you know, for the most part, if you understand a passage that the questions wouldn't take too long, then I think it's worth it. Like, I would say worth it to like spend the time to read it. If the questions take a lot less time, but if the questions end up taking a lot of time, um, then and you've already read it, then you can kind of think more so in terms of, you know, making you know, be like, all right, if I could eliminate these two choices and then I have just these two left, and I'm running out of time, I'm just gonna guess, flag, move on, and you know, at the very least, you have like a 50% chance of getting that right. So I think that can work. But I think for the most part, I guess doing what you're doing, yeah, I think that'll be good. I think that'll work.
Okay. All right. Well, we're in the end game now.
Yeah, literally. So, all right, awesome. So yeah, I think yeah, just for the rest of the day, kind of like chill, just passively review some social terms, and yeah, just make sure you get enough rest and everything.
Gotcha. All right, will do. Appreciate it.
Yeah. All right, awesome. So yeah, good luck. Let me know how it turns out. And oh yeah, so for today it should be let's see. 125 for today. Yep. And yeah, so yeah, I'll let you send that and then good luck for tomorrow, okay? Let me know how it turns out.
Yeah, I'll shoot you an email after. If I send you like a thumbs up, then like, oh, felt good. If not, don't respond.
Yeah, yeah. No, it'll be